Please join me in welcoming Kondwani Fidel.
Thank you. Thank you, bro. How's everyone doing? Oh, let me cut this mic on. Is it on? Yes? Okay, cool. When Colin first reached out to me with this opportunity, I said to myself, you got to seize this moment, right? I'm like, dreams really do come true, right? And I knew that I was going to ask him for a life-changing request, right? Been telling my grandmother this since I was a child. He was like, hey, I want you to be the inaugural speaker for this George Taliaferro series. So I say, cool. However, I'm gonna need one thing from you. You gotta get me a 10-day contract for running back. Like, it would make my grandmother so happy. Even if I don't like touch the grass. Like if I just had on like a Baltimore Ravens helmet, like she probably would melt, you know what I mean? But you know, I love sports growing up. I played football, wasn't really good. Played basketball, wasn't really good. Played baseball, I don't even, it's like a blur, you know? And when you're not good, you gotta find out the hard way. You know, because when you good, everybody always telling you so good, you a star, you're gonna be great, right? So I realized, I was like, I only get in a game when we like up by 30 points or down by like 45 points. So clearly me being in the game doesn't really matter, right? So even growing up, right, like I wasn't good at sports, but I had a lot of friends who actually were. That like has star-like quality on, you know, both the basketball and football end. Some of them, you know, went off to, you know, play, you know, for schools like Archbishop Carroll. Some are stars at Dunbar City, whatever the case may be. And the same with basketball. And you know, when you're young, you know, you kind of craft your future around your friends, right? And I was kind of always like a little bit smarter than everybody that I was hanging around. So I said, all right, look, let me control this whole scenario. Right? I say, boom. All right, Deke, you gonna go to college. You probably gonna do like one and done, and then you gonna go to the league, right? I say, Raymond, you know, he got a hard head sometimes, so he might do all 4 years and go blah, blah, blah. But I'm gonna go to college, and I'm gonna be a sport agent, so I can be all of y'all agents, and then we make all of this money together, right? That sound cool, right? Make all this money with your childhood friends. So, you know, that kind of never happened, but clearly, but. So I'm applying for colleges, you know, in high school around that time. And, you know, how I ended up going to, you know, a school like Archbishop Carroll my freshman year. And then, you know, graduating from Baltimore City College High School. You know, I always got good grades when I was younger. You know, through grade school, I got straight A's, and everybody in my family, you know, thought that I was in love with education. And it just wasn't true. I was only getting straight A's because my Aunt Sadiq gave me $20 for every A that I got on my report card. And that's just that. And one day, she had a conversation with me and was like, hey, you know, I'm gonna stop giving you money one day because this is what you're supposed to be doing with your life, and you're gonna be an adult one day. And I'm like, yeah, it just wasn't making sense, right? And my grades slipped a little bit, but I still never failed. So I still had the opportunity to go to these good schools. And, you know, I'm applying to all of these colleges, you know, and I only got accepted to 2, which was Virginia State University, which is in Petersburg, Virginia. Then you got Virginia Union University, which is in Richmond, Virginia, which is 30 minutes, you know, north of that. And my cousin Avon, so Avon that y'all know, his son, my older cousin, was a freshman at Virginia Union at the time. So I called Avon, you know, because he's a year older than me. I kind of asked him for advice all of the time. So I'm like, yo, Avon, what school should I go to? And he said, you should go ahead and go to Virginia State. So I'm like, dang, my cousin must really hate me, because why wouldn't you say your protocol should have just been come to school with me, right? He's like, yo, they got better sports programs. They got better technology. They have a bigger campus, just like literally trying to sell me to this other school. And then he said, the girls at Virginia State way better than the girls at Virginia Union. I said, you should have been said that. and I accepted my offer to Virginia State University studying sport management. So I'm there on campus, right? And it's my freshman week, you know, you getting acclimated, you meeting new friends, and I kept seeing this acronym, right? HBCU. So I'm like, fuck, like, what is that? What is a HBCU? Right? It's kind of like everybody has those moments when they first seen the acronyms for LMAO, LOL. You did not know what they meant. You just seen it, and everybody else around you using it, and you don't want to ask publicly because you're going to sound dumb publicly. So you do two things. You wait for somebody else to ask publicly, and you like slide in a tweet and be like, okay, screenshot, you know, now I know what it means. Or, you know, somebody just explains it, you know, just willingly. So I kept seeing this acronym, HBCU, 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 and I'm like, yo, what is this? This is on billboards, hats. I think one girl had like an arm tat, like with an HBCU, and I'm like, so I called Avon again, because I call him for everything. And I say, Avon, you know, what is an HBCU? And it was a long like pause on a you know, phone. I say, hello, hello. He said, you serious? And I said, yeah. He say, it's a historically black college university, dummy. And like I had one of the like most simplest but realest moments. I'm like, yo, that's why it's no white people here. I'm like, that makes perfect sense, right? And at this time in my life, you know, I never seen School Days or Do the Right Thing or any movies that like explicitly talked about black college life coming from a city that has two HBCUs. And that's kind of like another conversation for another day, right? So I really didn't know. I wasn't acclimated to the culture, you know. However, you know, I'm here studying sport management, and I had English classes, you know, my first semester, English 101. And I had a professor named Arnold Westbrook, and he channeled his lessons through African American studies. And, you know, this was my first time being engaged with artists like Maya Angelou, Langston Hughes, Toni Morrison. We would read Tupac lyrics in class. We would watch episodes of the Boondocks. We watched Chris Rock's documentary about the stereotypes that revolve around the definition of good and bad hair, right? And I kind of found myself falling in love with reading. And I was a person who always said, you know, I hated reading, right? But in those moments, I realized I never hated reading. I just hated what my instructors in the past was trying to force me to read, right? So I started loving reading so much so where I would literally skip other classes to sit in my dorm room and read the dictionary, read books, right? Read literally everything that I could get my hands on, from Tupac lyrics to Amy Winehouse lyrics, like for real, right? So I become part of this mentoring organization my sophomore year. And, you know, we was having this event around Valentine's Day, and we had this dance group who was gonna perform at Intermission, but they like backed out last minute, like a week before. So we in our board meetings, you know, saying like what we gonna do. And I say, you know, I'll do a poem. And at this time, nobody knew that I did poetry except for Avon, my friend Antonio, and my friend Jelante that I had met on campus. And they told me that my work was good, but I don't think that they read enough poetry to really be able to gauge, you know what I mean? Like, it was one point where they was like, yo, you the best poet walking in the world. And I'm like, you never even left Baltimore? Like, how you even know that? Like, you got dial-up internet. Like, how you know, like, where you get it, you know what I mean? So I would go to them, and I would share these poems with them, and I would lie. And I would be like, yo, this is a poem. I would think of the most non-Googleable name ever. So I'll be like, yo, this poem is by James Winkleberry III. He from the north side of South Dakota, and his favorite ice cream, butter pecan. Like, I just think it's something crazy. And they was like, oh, it's work hard. And I was like, you know, I kind of got excited again. So long story short, you know, I tell my organization that I'll perform. And February 10th, 2013 rolled around. And one of the most scariest days of my life, because I never spoke in front of a crowd, never spoke in front of people, never did anything like this. But I went up there in front of like 200 strangers. And, you know, I literally like had moments where I was like blacking out. Like, that whole Eminem 8 Mile thing is real. Like, throwing up the mom's spaghetti. I ain't throw up, but I really felt like I was, right? And then also, a few years before I got there, people on campus were telling me that Chris Brown performed on campus and he did a horrible job and he got booed. So I'm like, man, if they boo Chris Brown, what's gonna happen to me? You know, like I'm just looking at the numbers, like, so, you know, I get up there, I perform this poem in front of, you know, this large crowd, and I had got a standing ovation, and I said to myself, you know, you can only get better at this, right? Like, you're not the smartest person in the world, but just mathematically, this makes sense. Like, if this is your first time, you can just get better. So that next day, I marched to Gandy Hall, and I changed my major from sport management to English, and it kind of just been a wrap ever since. And I was on campus, and I started performing for different fraternities and sororities on the yard, different events like Veterans Day, Breast Cancer Awareness Day, just regular open mics, you know, that's just going on. You know, it kind of spread around, you know, the Petersburg area, then the Richmond area. And, you know, I ended up doing things like becoming Mr. Alpha Eta for Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, which is kind of like the male figurehead. I got the pledge, you know, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. I became Mr. Senior. Did a lot of good things, you know what I mean? Graduated, came back home to Baltimore, and I realized that I did everything that the adults in my life told me not to do, which was get internships, have jobs lined up, right? I didn't do any of those things. And it was like one of the most depressing moments of my life, because here I am back in East Baltimore, back on Luzerne and Jefferson, in my grandmother's basement with this skill and a degree, but nothing to show for it. So I had a friend named Raheem who's been working with Rex and Parks for years. So he was a lifeguard down Patterson Park and down at the swimming pool. So he got me a job working as a pool attendant. And, you know, I saved up some money, got me a minivan. I self-published a book at that time, and I told myself, you know, this is going to be like your tour, you know, vehicle. You're going to travel up and down the East Coast, which I did, everywhere from New York to Virginia to DC to, you know, parts of Massachusetts, just hitting spots and sharing my work, sharing my handles. And, you know, it just came a time where, you know, my phone would start pinging on my emails, and there was professors, you know, and teachers and scholars, you know, saying that, hey, we saw your work on the internet, or, you know, someone gave me your book, and, you know, we want you to come teach our students. And I'm like, teach? You know, like academia was never a goal of mine. Getting in front of students was never a goal of mine at that point in my life. So when the teachers and instructors and professors invited me into their classrooms, you know, I took it as an opportunity just to further my craft, just to further my name. I really didn't care about the kids. I'm just being honest. But, you know, while I'm in these spaces, you know, I seen how my work was resonating with these children. And everything from them sending me DMs on social media, or me seeing them literally walking in the mall, or me seeing them walking the streets going to go get my hair cut, and they would say things like, yo, your book is the first book that I read cover to cover. You know, I didn't think that, you know, I liked reading until I read your work. I thought I hated poetry until I heard your poetry. And I was like, dang, they sound exactly how you sounded, you know, when you were in college. So then, like, my moral obligation kind of started shifting, and that's when I started, like, explicitly focusing on, you know, academia and, like, and studying, you know, the disparities that's in education when it comes to the books and the literature and the content that's placed in these majority Black schools and also the majority white schools. It's like everybody just has this lineup, right, and just teach what they want to teach without, you know, telling all sides of the story, telling all sides of everybody's story, right? Because I know growing up, like, I really didn't know of too many, you know, coming of age stories about people that look like me. Like, I remember, like, reading, like, Tom Sawyer, and it was, like, a little Black dude that was, like, chasing pigs around a gate or something like that. You know what I mean? But it was nothing, like, that I could relate to. You know what I mean? I never even seen a pig before in real life. Never, like, Charlotte's Web. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. You know, so I never read, you know, texts, you know, that mention of the blocks that I walked and the places where, you know, I learned some of my favorite lessons, you know, some of the places where I took some of my biggest L's, some of my biggest W's. So, you know, that kind of became, you know, my focal point, you know, and then, you know, years later now, you know, I told myself that I wanted to do what Arnold Westbrook did for me And that's why I went to get my MFA in creative writing and publishing arts from the University of Baltimore, because I knew that was a terminal degree. And I told myself, I really got the old tweets to prove it. I was like, yo, I'm gonna be an English professor at an HBCU, you know what I mean? In 2020, I graduated and from UB, and I just completed, my second semester teaching, as an assistant professor in English at Coppin State University, and that's kind of huge, and being as though I'm 29 years old, and being like the first full-time hire in like the past 15 years, you know what I mean? Like I set that out, and it's like we just gotta keep building these monuments stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger for tomorrow, So I just had to share like that. It's not small, but I can talk a lot, but that's just like a small intro of like, how I got to places, like this. So I'm gonna read something from my book. That's cool? Yeah. All right. I was a child when I first realized that nothing or no one lasts forever. People leaving was routine. I remember walking home from school and seeing the entire inside furnishings and possessions of my friends' families' home on their front yard. Landlords kicked them out for unpaid rent. I see my parents get handcuffed and escorted to jail in cop cars. Some friends were leaving body bags. Custody battles between two parents on the street always ended up in some kind of violence. They claim heartbreak is why they left. In my neighborhood, leaving was normal, and it was always abrupt. It was never like in the movies. No one wrote any notes and explained to people why they left. It wasn't like the workplace. There was no 2 weeks notice. The adults in my life that held authority positions like teachers and family were gifted at making children believe they themselves knew everything about the world, until it was time to discuss departure. No one had the knowledge or the guts to explain why people left or if they'd ever return. Why do so many people die in the summertime? I asked my grandmother as a child, and she answered me as clear as she could. It was because the summertime heat goes to people's head, which makes them act out of character, or because the children aren't in school, so now they have more time to get in trouble, or because people just like to show off. She concluded her monologues with, "That's just what happens in the summertime, baby. A lot of people die." Summers in Baltimore are an old pair of tennis shoes. My parents walked them, I walked them, and the tennis shoes are currently on the feet of the youth. If you ride through pretty much any neighborhood in East Baltimore or West, you'll see packs of kids outside cracking open fire hydrants, eating chicken boxes, standing on corners, scraping frozen sugar out of styrofoam cups with spoons, and watching the 12 o'clock boys perform stunts up and down the block on their dirt bikes. The old heads were always out there too, playing spades on fold-up tables, cans of Bud Ice, yelling about who's the greatest NBA Hall of Famer. It was always a party. And it's common for parties to get broken up. I mean, was the party really that popping if it wasn't on the verge of getting broken up and shut down? Maybe it was because of a fist fight or a neighbor making complaints, which prompted the cops to come and close the party down. Whether it was during grade school, high school, as an undergrad, everyone has had a function that gets broken up. But when a party gets broken up by bullets, it's different. Shots ring off, people duck, screaming on all three. The second the smoke clears, you look around and realize no one was aiming at you or the people you were with, but it was echoing from around the corner. So everyone who has legs runs toward the sound of the fire because the gun told us to. It's the puppeteer. While running, I'm pretty sure the same thought is on the forefront of everyone's mind. This body will belong to one of us. No matter how fast you run to the scene, the majority of the time the police will beat you there because there are one too many in our neighborhood who stay on the prowl. The summer is coming to an end, and the K through 12 school year starts, and there will be children sitting in steaming hot classrooms with no AC, reading from ancient textbooks, and on the receiving end of being miseducated, and their creativity, critical, and analytic thinking will be threatened because of this miseducation and of not being represented in the literature being taught. It eventually goes from hot to cold as soon as the Christmas season, but the lack of heat causes devastation. bills go unpaid, and families use their ovens to heat up their homes, use candles for light, which end up burning down homes and taking away lives, which happened to my little brother. In these same houses, you have children that eat paint chips and are severely affected by lead paint poisoning. And through it all, we have to walk the streets and keep our head on a swivel because, as we all know, Baltimore City police have a long track record of robbing, planting drugs and guns, abusing, and sometimes even murdering innocent people. And all of this pain comes with some people's experience in Baltimore. Toni Morrison has a quote where she says, "History is in percentiles, the thoughts of great men and the description of errors," end quote. Eras of racism constantly change. My ancestors' era was rife with lynchings, cottons, and people being sold for crates of gunpowder and rum. At least that's how it was taught to me. We live in an era now where we can open up an app on our phone, read some spiritual enlightening scripture, swipe to another app, and see a video of the white killer cop Derek Chauvin kneeling on George Floyd's neck while he was handcuffed and lying on his stomach for 8 minutes, crying for his dead mother until then he himself was murdered. But let's take it back a bit. In 1901, Theodore Roosevelt wrote to his friend Owen Wister, an American writer and historian, "I entirely agree with you that as a race and in a mass, blacks are altogether inferior to whites. I suppose I should be ashamed to say that I take the Western view of the Indian. I don't go so far as to think that the only good Indians are the dead Indians, but I believe 9 out of every 10 are, and I shouldn't like to inquire too closely into the case of the 10th. The most vicious cowboy has more moral principle than the average Indian." And Roosevelt quote encompasses why the police in Shelby, North Carolina, could buy the 21-year-old white supremacist Dylan Roof Burger King because he hasn't eaten in a couple days. This was hours after his arrest for killing 9 black churchgoers, and after they can label him very calm, very quiet, and note that he was not problematic. Insane. The negative parts of our history, they don't have to repeat themselves, but oftentimes they do. Roosevelt existed before a person like Dylan Roof existed. He actually kind of laid the groundwork for people like him to exist, right? For many generations, you have black Baltimoreans. I don't care if it's your favorite rapper from whatever undeserved community you're from, you know that we always talk about, you know, our run-ins, you know, that we have with police. It's public record, it's video, it's body cams. Who in here seen We Own the City by a show of hands? Right? Like, these are not made up stories. These are court documents. These have been like witness statements. These are things that are well documented, right? And these are the things that happen, right? And these people, right, they rob people of, you know, their innocence, right? And you get locked up for a crime that you did not commit, right? Then now you're sitting in a cell. Now you losing money, you know, because you're not working. And then you come home, plot twist, you lost your job because you're not working. You couldn't call nobody, you couldn't call out, you don't got no time off, right? And that kind of puts a dent in your whole family structure, right? And like even to bring, you know, this closer to home, you know, look at the NFL organization that we clearly all have some kind of love for because we here, right? But like, we know that from 1933 to 1946, like, they banned black players, right? It's not a myth, it's not new news, it's not, you know, I'm not breaking anything here, you know what I mean? It's not a mystery, right? But that 12-year ban not only excluded players, but it kept minorities from getting jobs as coordinators, head coaches, general managers, and so forth, right? And we see this time after time where history dictates our todays, and our todays literally dictates the future. It's really not that hard to understand, right? And like one of my favorite examples of what happens, you know, when we allow people to live in what they believe they're destined to do, and don't deprive them and give them, you know, opportunity and give them space to, you know, be the geniuses that they are, you know, that's how we get people like Lamar Jackson's. His whole story. Just look at it from the bottom up until now, right? Like all the obstacles he came with in his personal life, in his career. And again, this is not, he's home. You know what I mean? This isn't like a new story. I'm not breaking anything. All this stuff can be found on Google, right? But like look at what people were saying about his career. He's not ready. He can't be a quarterback because he's a running back, right? We know that racial stacking played a part in like why certain people were, assigned to different positions, right? Like we know these things. Like look at who's this event is commemorating, right? So I say that to say, right, because of Lamar's perseverance and clearly, his mother, who he always, shouts out and talks about him, her being, an important part of that, right? He ended up, cracking so many records that people dreamed of, right? Like, finishing his career at Louisville, the youngest Heisman winner at 19, right? A winner of the Maxwell Award, right? Like, I can keep going on and on and on about him breaking Mike Vick's record or whatever, right? And again, even players like, George Taliaferro, who I believe that we all owe gratitude. Anybody that looked like me, him, Lamar, we owe gratitude for even being in spaces like this because it was a time where it didn't exist. And again, I say history repeats itself when there are no quantifiable goals being presented and accomplished, what could and would most certainly dismantle systems of oppression. And today is what the past created. And we gotta ask ourselves, what will our tomorrows look like? What will the tomorrows for our children look like? What will the tomorrows for our neighbors look like? We can assure that we have to build tomorrows, beautiful tomorrows, for them to even look forward to. So everything from Roosevelt being a catalyst for Dylan Roof, from corrupt policing being a catalyst for the way they reroute people's family structures, organizations like, the NFL who deny black players opportunity, right? Like futures have been threatened with forever lasting issues and sometimes even death, because no one really cared about their tomorrows. And, the bigoted past decisions made in this country locks us out from accessing the treasures of our today, as I mentioned, right? Those decisions that, that make today lock us out of accessing those treasures for tomorrow. However, the decisions made in this country today, as in right now, as in with all of us standing in this room, it could be rooted in promise. It could be rooted in possibility. It could be rooted in the truth. And this could give us access to our treasures for tomorrow, because I believe that that's literally just what everybody deserves, right? When I was a kid, I'm lying. When I was in my early 20s, I didn't know what systemic oppression was. You know what I mean? I didn't know that the things that I suffered as a child was from my product of racism. Like, man, racism is dead. You know what I mean? We not enslaved anymore, right? I didn't believe that these things were real, right? I just knew that city school, the private schools, were better than the city schools. That's it, right? But when I look back at it, one of the things that I always did believe, though, is that it was kind of something wrong with black people, because that's what they made it look like in the media. That's what you heard in conversation, right? So again, when we're talking about being truthful, right, the pain that I endured growing up without any truthful context or why that pain exists is what forms and nourishes racist ideas to exist, right? Again, I might step foot on the campus of a HBCU and not know what the acronym stands for because I never seen anybody go to one before. So an elite black person might call me an idiot, right? When in all actuality, I just haven't been exposed to it or never seen it on television. Or add to the fact that some of our parents, including my two, never even graduated high school. So how could they ever teach me about what a historically black college university is and the importance of it, right? And the stereotypes I face and the things I go to add to the racist ideas that any and everyone can consume and produce, right? And, when I was writing this book, I had reached out to one of my mentors, Eric Rice, who is a professor at Hopkins. And, I was telling him, it's not, in my life, it's not really a black and white issue explicitly, because I'm like, yo, it's both white and black people who I meet that have no proximity to anything that I witnessed growing up, right? And what we go through, right? And they always, frequently ask questions in regard to understanding the racial injustice in this country, and they say, I want to learn about these things that are not part of my reality. And Eric Rice was, no. It's about getting them to understand that it is indeed a part of their reality. And our two different worlds are merely two sides of the same coin, right? Baltimore operates the way it does because people made conscious decisions to fund highways for people in the suburbs instead of jobs and education for inner city black students. Baltimore operates the way it does because conscious decisions were made to pay out millions of dollars in lawsuits because police can't stop terrorizing the people they are supposed to protect and serve. A conscious decision was made to fund the police department and prisons and not to build up these undeserved black communities, right? And there are both white and black Americans who support the construction of more prisons. If you go to my grandmother right now and say, Miss Murray, do you want to abolish the police? She'll be like, hell no. You know what I mean? It's not like people, we live in America here. You know what I mean? And that's not to say whether I believe in that idea or not, but however, it's actions of these people that are affecting, others. It exists. You know what I mean? And I was at, I had gave this talk at Micah, right? And they were studying one of my books, Hummingbirds in the Trenches. And this guy had hopped on the talk, and he said something like, I want to help people in these communities, but we are taught to like fear the people in these communities or whatever, and I responded to that, with this essay titled Cinderella's Stepsisters from The Source of Self-Regard, which is one of Toni Morrison's books. Clearly, I probably see that I quote Toni Morrison a lot. It's like one of my favorite people. But in this piece, she wrote, in your rainbow journey towards the realization of personal goals, don't make choices based only on your security and your safety. Nothing is safe. That is not to say that anything ever was or anything worth achieving ever should be. The things of value seldom are. It is not safe to have a child. It is not safe to challenge the status quo. It is not safe to choose work that has not been done before or old work in a new way. Don't let your safety diminish the safety of your stepsisters, end quote. And I'm just thinking when she said that, don't let safety or lack thereof determine what you're gonna do. Cause I'm like, we really like probably the most unsafe country, like, you know what I mean? Not the most, but like people reckless, right? As children, our parents say, hey, don't climb up that tree. We do it anyway, right? Don't drink too much and party while you in college. We do it anyway, right? What's another one? How many parents told us, don't talk to strangers, right? Who in here parent told them not to talk to strangers? Raise their hand, right? Now we got an app. But we literally call strangers to our homes to pick us up and take us to other places that we deem sacred. If that's not unsafe, right? Like people go on vacations and they stick their arms in the mouths of wild animals, right? So what is unsafety really? Has anybody seen that viral video of the orangutan? And he was like almost like ripped the dude. He like whatever fabric that shirt is, like I want it because he still had it when he got away. But I say all of these things, right? Like we gotta ask ourselves, are we afraid of the unsafe or the unknown, or are we afraid of a certain group of people? What are we truly afraid of? And I feel like it's a question that we all gotta ask ourselves, And again, I feel like, my experiences, that I had being in this city always got buried under, politics, mainstream media. And, I feel like that my writing and my reading and just my journey has allowed me, the opportunity to examine my experiences and analyze them and, come up with liberating ideas that, help me grow and share truth, through my poetry and my storytelling. And, in my book, The Anti-Racist, I explore ways that, we all, can combat racist ideas through understanding the complexities of various experiences outside of our own, right? And through essays, I show, kind of touch on, what I talked about today as it relates to, my upbringing in Baltimore, right? And I chose to combat racism through this lens so that people don't have to face the same roadblocks early on and thus become, anti-racist early on. The same way I put my story out there is the same way I gotta understand someone else's story and unlearn falsehoods I was conditioned to believe about them. Doing this work is acknowledging someone else's story, someone else's pain, and not discounting their journey, right? However, don't confuse just knowing someone's story and reading about the work, with actually doing the work. Like, both need to exist. For example, I got a friend named Anthony Williams who wanted to engage in a community in a way that he hasn't never seen before, right? So this was like during the beginning of the pandemic, and but it was kind of like safe for people to start coming outside, right? And he started this run group, right? Because he learned that, it was members in certain Black communities that had an increased risk of getting COVID-19 or experiencing severe illness from the virus, right? So he started this club where people would meet up every Tuesday. He found funding and he provided free food and, providing, healthy foods, with hopes of motivating people, in the community to maintain a healthy lifestyle, things that they probably don't have the extra money to put towards, right? If you got to send kids, to school or to daycare or whatever, like paying for a gym membership probably just not, in your near future, right? But however, he did the quantifiable goal thing, right? He identified an issue within the community. He came up with goals and a strategy to meet those goals, provided a roadmap that leads to helping others live a healthier lifestyle, which is ultimately fighting against structural poverty. Cool, right? Brittany Young, she's a Black woman from Baltimore. She saw issues in the city revolving around dirt bike riding on both ends, right? So she say, I feel like I should, do something about this. And as a kid, Brittany is always honest about, how she loved, watching dirt bikes coming up. And she always admired people being so young and uneducated in the academia world, right? But how they were able to fix bikes and break them down and they literally baby engineers, right? So that inspired her to create a solution through B360, which is a STEM education program that hires former street riders to teach the engineering design process, mechanics of dirt bikes, low-risk riding techniques, and allowing recreation in safe spaces, right? Her program also calls out the need to lessen nonviolent crime, specifically for riding dirt bikes, and even trying to work to replace the jail time with fines and community service, right? And this is disrupting, the school to prison pipeline, and she used her experience in STEM to create these programs, that's geared towards bridging the communities, advocating for more relevant ways to teach STEM, the children who live in low-income areas, right? And she also works with other cities to help them with their programs, right? And I say all that to say, things and the reason that she even realized that Baltimore was lacking in STEM so much was after Freddie Gray had passed. It was all of these articles in the media talking about Baltimore reading levels and their education levels and what they don't have access to. And she was like, yo, that's right up my alley. You know what I mean? So she took it upon herself to start that, right? And you have these people who identify something, they see how they can help, and then they kind of build something around it and just do the best that they can. Everybody is not gonna be Martin Luther King. That's just a fact. But when you look at Martin Luther King, he did not do that by himself, right? Who in the world can get 250,000 people at the same place, at the same time, on the same day, with no email blast, right? No text, none of that, right? How do you do that? You don't do that by yourself, right? Who was making the flyers? Who was doing the carpooling? Who was driving from state to state just to pick people up? Who was handing out the waters? Who was cooking the food? Who was watching the babies? You know what I mean? Like this took a large community of people, and I feel like that if we look at, you know, what we want to accomplish in life and the ways that we want to help, that's like the perfect example of how we all can be hands-on when it comes to the things that we want to help with. Like, just find your thing. If you're good at building resumes, right, find out how you can get access to people who are not savvy with building resumes and see how you can loan your services. Right, with me, I know that a lot of, you know, young black, you know, children in this city, in Baltimore, right, like they don't have in-home libraries, so I try to help build them, right? I go to schools in the city and I teach creative writing workshops for free because I know that they don't have creative writing teachers. I know that they rarely read books, you know, where they can see themselves in, right? I got a friend named Devin Allen who's a photographer, right? He literally gets money and buys cameras and give them away to students in Baltimore City. And he also teaches students with autism how to use these cameras, right? Like, this is people, like, this is real life work. Like, so the reading is cool, the pulling up to the events is cool, you know, the tweeting it and hashtagging it is cool, but it's like, what we really doing? You know what I mean? And everybody here has the opportunity, you know what I mean, to help as much as they can, right? And I feel like one of the most, you know, liberating things that I learned on this journey, you know, that I didn't know back then, right, is nothing wrong with black people, right? Like, it's systems, it's certain places that we got put in, that we got confined to, because again, like that past and today, right, and it confines us. Like, we not inferior. We might be in inferior, you know, in places, you know, that try to snatch things from us and take things from us, you know. And I'm not here to gain or police, you know, like anybody's liberation or what that idea is. Like, if you want to go home and, you know, get some Starbucks and chill on the couch and like kiki with your homegirls on the phone, like, hey, like, all power to you, you know what I mean? But, you know, I'm just here to just, you know, make people aware of the things and the injustices that, you know, are rarely covered or encountered in depth by the mainstream media, you know, whose spokespeople have little direct knowledge of the real issues, only providing quick statistics and surface analysis, and, you know, hardly ever giving platform to people who truly know the issues, you know, from their root causes to workable solutions, right? And I feel like it's just about past time, you know, that we get together and give insight on how we all can do better. And I'm gonna end on this note. Through my own experience and research, you know, I came to an understanding that growth and becoming anti-racist are not one-stop shops or a fixed state to be satisfied with, but a lifelong commitment to re-examining the way one thinks and the way one reacts. And my mother, she just finished a drug rehabilitation program out in Laurel, Maryland. And, you know, my mother has been in and out of rehabilitation centers since I was a child, been in and out of jails and prisons since I was a child, getting rehabilitated, coming back home, back and forth. And I will find myself at times like just not having faith in her, just not believing in her, just not, you know, like, oh, whatever, she just gonna mess up again. She gonna come home and do the same thing. If it's 2 months later or if it's 8 months later, you know what I mean? But in those moments, you know, that I realized that she keep going back. It's like, yo, it's not a one-stop shop. Right, like, these things take time. People make mistakes. We all make mistakes. Nobody is perfect at all. Nobody. We're gonna be good today, and we might not be good 2 years from now, right? But we're gonna need that community. We're gonna need the people around us. We're gonna need, you know, whoever we pray to. You know what I mean? We're gonna need these things to keep us moving. So I feel like she's a metaphor of how I see all people in this world. And, you know, some people just don't have access to information. Just like how I say I didn't know what systemic oppression was when I'm in it. What makes you think that a 45-year-old white man in the middle of Wisconsin is gonna know what's going on my block if I don't even know what's going on my block? You know what I mean? Like, people have access to different information depending on who they are. You know what I mean? So I look at her as a metaphor for that all the time. But I say again, it's not a one-stop shop or a fixed state to be satisfied with, but a lifelong commitment to re-examining the way one thinks and one acts, you know. And as crazy as the world might seem at times, like, and, you know, my homeboys get on me about it all the time, but like, I'm optimistic. You know, I do believe that we can live in a humane, you know, society one day. I believe that we won't, live in a world where we gotta be fearful of going to the grocery store or going to a club, because we might not go home to our children, or our children might not come home to us. Like, I truly, honestly believe that we can honestly get to that place. I believe that it will come a time, when mothers and fathers won't have to, bury their kids because they victims of poverty, right? I believe that one day we can truly live in an anti-racist society. And, being on this journey to, become anti-racist, and on this journey to be an asset to people, who don't have access to opportunities that we have, it's just a freedom that I never knew existed. Like, I thought I was free back then, you know what I mean? But as much as I'm around different communities or places like this and just building with so many different people across the world, it's a reminder that I feel like we're gonna be all right. You know what I mean? Again, the media not gonna show this. They're not gonna show the meetings. They're not gonna show when people, like Gil Scott say, the revolution will not be televised. Like, the revolution is when you realize that, oh, something is going on in this world and I need to do something about it. That's never recorded. It's never caught on film, nothing, right? So we never gonna see that. But I feel like I see it sometimes, you know what I mean? Or people tell me about it, right? So I feel like that we in good hands, you know what I mean? And this freedom, I feel like, it's available to all of us, and I feel like it belongs to all of us, so we should go get it, Thank y'all for listening to my talk. Appreciate it.